Uh, well, thank you for the introduction, and good morning and good evening, everyone. My name is Roberto Martinez Maldonado, and I'm going to present this paper in behalf of my co-authors Rita, Roger, Jane, Lori, Simon, and Elise, who were not able to attend physically or digitally this edition of LAG. And I would like to start to present this short paper. So the intention is more provocative, but we also present some evidence. And we start from evidence-based practices in education, and from this area that has been going for quite a long time, in which the idea is to make, for the teachers to embrace the use of facts instead of opinions or beliefs, to deliver their learning designs and all kind of interventions, but also in education and educational research. And we know that in Learn Analytics, there is an opportunity to provide this kind of evidence, either for research to advance educational technology research, but also, as we can see in these examples, we have books that are aimed at teachers to embrace Learn Analytics in the classroom, and also papers that have been talking about using Learn Analytics to improve the inquiry cycle of the teacher, for the teacher to become almost a scientist, looking at the evidence and then making interventions based on this information. However, we also know that there are some limitations that have been highlighted in different papers, and some more people even in the first day of the conference, which include for learners, for example, finding hard to interpret these dashboards that we put in front of them, or even harder to act upon this information without further guidance. And the same can apply for teachers. And it has been argued that this is due to poor design decisions. So sometimes we don't even report design aspects of the interventions. And also, as Carlos in the previous talk, and also yesterday in a talk by people in NYU, we're talking about the lack of involvement of teachers and learners in the design of the tools. So it's very, very relevant and aligned to the previous talk. But also we learned from Kito, Buckingham, Schumann, Gibson last year that we shouldn't aim for perfect learn analytics. The data we collect and the models we create are pretty much imperfect, incomplete. And sometimes we even end up measuring the wrong thing. So we end up sometimes building really, really great tools, but maybe their application is not adequate for the particular learning situations in which they are deployed in the end. This confirms Biest's concern about evidence-based practice, and he actually suggests that evidence should be subordinated to the values of the particular practice. And the key idea is, what are these values? How do we know, and what are the values that are important to endorse when we build this learn analytics? And the values is a big name for many other things that we need to know about educational practice. And the suggestion of this paper is actually aligned to this consolidated model, which was suggested by Gatsevich and colleagues. And I like this model because we often talk about theoretical education, educational theory, and data science principles being the core underpinnings for learning analytics innovations. And sometimes we often design is a third pillar that probably we need to keep looking at. And this is the session that talks about designing and designing with teachers and learners. This is also something that's emerging. It's not completely new. Actually, there was a special section in Journal of Learning Analytics featuring some papers there, and even in LAG as well, even a paper by Bodong Chen and Haiyu Xu last year, precisely talking about value-sensitive design for learning analytics, and there are many other papers that put this into practice. But these are we need more papers that talk about methodologies that people can actually follow, or tools like the ones we saw just now in this session and yesterday from colleagues in UCL and NYU and others. So I would like to untangle the title of the paper, or the short paper, first talking about what is this learning center translucence, and the key word is translucent. We work in the area of human-computer interaction, and we borrow this concept, which has been around in that field for around 20 years. And it has been used for designing what they call translucent systems that enhance the visibility of social activity, or in our terms could be learning activity. And the first property out of three properties that define the term translucence, or the concept of translucence, is visibility, which we are very familiarized with because it can be defined as the capability for seeing relevant information about a system, about learning activity in our case, or about social activity, and we can say that when we capture data and we plot it in the form of dashboards, we are doing this, right? It's the first thing that rapidly emerges, is making things visible, right? We hear that very often. The second property starts to make a difference, which rises from visibility, which is once you can see information, then you can make, ideally we can make informed decisions, evidence-based decisions, and take actions. So this concept, although awareness has been used as a synonym of visibility in some papers in Learn Analytics, I think it's more coupled to the concept of actionable insight. We have a paper a couple of years ago in the Journal of Learn Analytics in which the authors argue for this concept to make the difference in our field, how people can actually act upon data once they see it. And the third property is a term that is less used in our field, but has been indirectly covered, especially from the lens of privacy and ethics, but I think it's different, which is accountability, which is about the norms and rules and customs that emerge when things start are made visible and people become aware about what others are doing, and what are the implications of sharing this data and the mechanisms to enhance the accountability and endorse this accountability. I'm going to explain this later, but the contribution of this paper is precisely a human-centered approach to generate understanding about how teachers speak about data, how they talk about data, what are their data needs, and using these three key principles. Why are we doing this? I use this slide in pretty much all my presentations because it's not something I said, but it's something that Professor Peter Goodyear from education said a few years ago. When talking about online learning, he said online learning doesn't happen online. It happens where the learner is. And let's imagine in this figure that we build the best recommender system. And we have this learning situation. And there's a big mismatch because that recommender system was built on the assumption that there was one student interacting with it. So the situation totally changes when we have three people, even if the girls are not talking, but their presence is already making a difference there. And if they interact, it becomes a collaborative learning situation that the system is not ready to address. And it's going to be working under a lot of assumptions. So when we speak with teachers and students and understand the process, when we start to realize what are the real pain points. So the process, so we provide in the paper a description of a potential overarching process, and then we present one illustrative scenario. So the overarching process that we suggest, and from this we can branch and just even talk about this first phase, we suggest the first generative phase in which generative tools for co-design are used. And these tools, well, we can say that there are tools for dreaming, and a few researchers in our field have been using them. And this means to help stakeholders or enable them to externalize their ideas without any constraint. This means that if we start talking with them about building a dashboard, we already made a design decision, and we are not attending their actual pain points. So overall, these generative tools include, it is more than post-its, it can include several tools, and I would invite the audience to check, for example, the paper below, the bottom of this slide, to learn more about these tools, but there are tools that we don't need to reinvent for that, or we can have other tools like the for learning analytics, like the cards that we also Carlos explained yesterday. Sorry, just half an hour ago. And the second phase is actually two subphases together, which is we need to converge and to start doing actually something, cannot just keep in the dreaming zone. And this includes a sub-process called norming, and then the other one, which is called prioritizing. Norming includes the assessment and categorization of all these ideas and pain points that teachers or students may have. And then we prioritize, and we can use tools such as SWOT analysis for prioritizing, voting, ranking, and we already have different kinds of tools for both sub-processes. And last phase is to explicitly elicitate information about actionability, about what we call awareness, and what would people do with information when they have it, when would they have it, and how this information, or what kind of information would make each role or each stakeholder in the educational system accountable, and if the data should be made available for different roles and for what purposes. So I'm going to jump to the second part of the title, which is how we apply these phases in an actual workshop with teachers to understand how they were how were they talking about their experience. So we ran a workshop with pre-service teachers who just came from 6 weeks of teaching with kids, with school kids, and they had their experience really fresh. They are master's students, so they had actually lots of experience already, but they usually don't use data, and the concept of learning analytics was completely new for them. So we started from a completely blank sheet, with the overall idea of the workshop was to understand what aspect of the classroom or the learning activity would be good to see when they are in the classroom. So another way to say what data do you need. And we use a number of tools for this, from brainstorming, brainwriting, and also clustering, ranking ideas, and then doing affinity diagrams, and other things that actually I explained in the paper. But overall, what we did was to run the workshop with key questions, with a protocol, and they came up with certain themes of several pain points that they were facing. So the details about the analysis, you can find them in the class and the paper. So I would like to discuss a little bit deeper the overall results and highlight certain data needs that they face. And this is a diagram that explains or puts together the pain points faced by two groups of teachers in two different workshops, and the color themes or groups or items at the top, the ones in blue, are the most highly ranked. That doesn't mean that providing support, feedback, assessment, engagement, and orchestration are not important. It's just what they thought they needed more support. And this includes tracking behavior, especially of students when they are doing homework, so then they can do something in the class based on that information. Collaboration aspects, which is a critical problem, how to assess collaboration, and affective aspects of students, especially how students were feeling as a cohort, and even if the weather was affecting them, or if there were patterns in the classes and other things. So it's all very interesting, but I would like to highlight the translucence aspects by selecting some quotes of the teachers to illustrate what is the difference between visibility, awareness, and accountability. So this is one example of a teacher who was talking about the behavior in terms of reading, writing, and obviously the teacher was talking in words like, I would like to have a log of what the kids were doing, what did they read. All these is things that we can actually count. If they are, we can get some kind of digital log of what's happening using online tools, for example, which page they are actually on, so they can build a lesson around. So this is the critical, important transition of what is the purpose of making things visible. And as we can see, we start to see that they are using a wide variety of tools. When we go to collaboration, the teachers start to talk about Google Docs, face-to-face discussions, and also discussion forums, 3 tools at least just for collaboration. And obviously the teacher wants to see the progress of group work. And what, in this case, this teacher is asking for a function that tells me if they're collaborating, who has done most of the work, because there are complaints from students. As we know, all of we know, if we are educators, the pain points of doing collaborative work and the marking the collaborative work. And I would like to highlight the difference between visibility and awareness with this other quote from another teacher, in this case talking about specifically about writing skills and how the teacher explains at a higher level what is the writing skills, for example, punctuation, spelling, grammar, mistakes, and show this as an infographic, already hinting a solution very quickly. But pretty much with the objective to identify students that are struggling with the writing skills, and then the potential action. So if you can see this information, I can provide, it's not necessarily feedback, but even to know what to focus on. In this case, the story, the narrative, instead of spending time just editing students' work. So it's really interesting how they started to talk about all these actions and start to think about how Learn Analytics tool can support this process, which is not necessarily what we commonly build. And some teachers start to talk as well, obviously prompted through our protocol about, in this case, that even though the teacher doesn't have the time to check drafts, the teacher wants to be able to see what's the progress, and for students to know that they can see that if they know that the teacher can see what they're doing. And this makes a big difference. And this starts to hint about accountability. Is when you make information visible and the people, in this case the student, knows that the work is being made visible by whom, by the teacher, it changes already the rules of the game, right? So that's what accountability brings into our conception of how to design Learn Analytics system. And also the purpose of the use. In this case, teacher was talking about how they use YouTube, and sometimes when they're doing group work, because YouTube is allowed to be used as a learning tool, they are obviously off task, and the teacher wants to know if they are off task, of course, but also, and this is not in the quote, but the teacher wants to know what they are looking, not to forbid it or limit, but to adapt the lesson according to the things that are interesting for the students. So there is a trade-off. Obviously, he will start to talk about surveillance and how we can actually help teachers. So there are 2 takeaway points from this talk, and I would like to remark. The first one is to make a clear distinction between what we call visibility and awareness, so we can call it in a different way. One thing is making salient aspects of activity visible. Let's say we have a dashboard and we just plot the data. And the other thing is to communicate actionable insights and how, and this is more related with the meaning of the underlying data. And for this paper, there's a proposal, there's this difference. And the second one is about accountability. Maybe the concepts of actionable insights, visibility, and awareness are more common in our community. Accountability is a different concept, and is more about the form and purpose of disclosing the data. I understand that this connects really well with ethics and other aspects related to privacy. But accountability, when we start to understand it from a design point of view, we talk about features of the tools that actually inform when someone has access to the data. So I'm going to start to wrap up, but just trying to point at future work. In this case, what we want to do as well is to understand holistically what the teacher wants, to know what we can do from the learning analytics perspective. So we look at just about collaboration here, as I was mentioning. Kids collaborate through Google Docs, face-to-face discussions and forums. So we start to think about analytics that we may need to understand collaboration, including text analytics. Counting logs is what teachers want sometimes, but also looking at the content, and it's complex. So I'm going to stop here, just recommend that we have a much longer description of Translucence in a paper recently accepted for the Journal of Interactive Learning Environments, which is totally from a different perspective now about this workshop, and I'm open to respond to any question. Thank you.